and Cam Rogers coming at you, Tom Downey and Brian Rauf as well. We're going to get into the way too early 2018 top 25 rankings here, folks.
You all know who number 1 is.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you all know who number 1 is.
We've hinted at it just a little bit.
Never too early in my mind, though, to take a look at these rankings. So let's take a look at the teams that just missed out. And here's the list: A&M, Kansas State, Boise State, Florida, Memphis. Brian, I'll turn to you first. Which team has the best chance to kind of get out of that not ranked region and get into the ranked region?
I would say either, I'll give you two. I'll say A&M or Florida because of the new coaches. We don't know how they're going to look with the new coaches, with A&M and Jimbo Fisher, and Florida with Dan Mullen. We know with Florida specifically, they have a really good team, just no real quarterback. Yep. And if Dan Mullen can find his guy, Emory Jones was a 4-star recruit who they went hard after, former Ohio State commit who flipped on early signing day. If he's the guy Mullen wants, obviously, and if he can play at a high level early, I think Florida could be dangerous in the SEC East and potentially contend with Georgia and maybe Tennessee or South Carolina in there as well for the SEC East. In the West with A&M, they also have talent, not as much as Florida, but Jimbo Fisher's proven he's a very, very good coach. They may not come this year, but they may, end up being a year ahead of schedule.
And I'll throw out two other teams just because of the way their schedule could work out. I think Kansas State in a Big 12 that isn't quite as stacked as the SEC West is. I think that they could end up with a really quality year and be ranked in the top 25 at various points. And I think the two small scores, if Boise State and Memphis can have success in conference, if either of those teams is hanging out with 2 losses at most during the season, they'll find their way into the top 25 because there is some brand name with them.
The key for Memphis will be replacing Riley Ferguson.
It's going to be tough.
Yep.
All right, so those are the teams that just missed out in our top 25. Let's get into the rankings now. Number 25, the Texas Longhorns. Good recruiting class,
Texas
Tom.
is back.
Right?
You can say it every year, and then for 2 years afterwards, once they're actually back, if that ever happens.
They will be. We need to see them be more consistent on offense, but I think they're a quality team that'll be in the mix in the Big 12.
I remain a big fan of Tom Herman. The defense loses some key pieces, but I think we've seen that Todd Orlando is one of the best DCs really in all of college football right now. I think he deserves that level of credit. The offense now has to do a little bit better. They need the quarterbacks to have some kind of stability.
All right, Texas there at number 25. Number 24, the South Carolina Gamecocks. Brian, I'll turn this one to you.
Very curious to see. 70% of their roster last year made up of freshmen and sophomores, so next year they're going to have a ton of experience from this 9-win team they have coming back. They get Georgia at home next year. They have to play at Florida and at Clemson, which will be interesting to see kind of what happens with them there. They could be looking at another 9-win season, could potentially move up to 10. I think 11 wins is kind of pushing it, but I think they're good enough to be sort of an underdog, maybe push Georgia, be a number 2 in the SEC, maybe number 3, depending on how Florida does with Dan Mullen.
I agree.
But they could be, if everything breaks correctly and Jake Bentley takes another step forward as quarterback, as we've seen, he could be one of the better quarterbacks in the country.
How upset will Florida be if South Carolina ends up finishing second in the SEC East ahead of them?
It depends how they finish the year. It depends how they finish the year with Dan Mullen, because I think they realize that they have some work to do from McElwain, especially quarterback, and we'll give Mullen some slack with his success at Mississippi State if they're not great to start the season off.
I'm a big fan of that USC quarterback or South Carolina quarterback. I want to see him take that next step forward, at least for NFL purposes.
Bentley's a gamer, great deep thrower. The question for him is consistency and really an offensive coordinator who knows what he's doing.
Sounds like a young quarterback.
Yes.
The Cox are at number 24. How about number 23? Mississippi State showed their flashes this season, guys. And the real question for me, Fitzgerald, how does he perform?
I want to see if there's a Moorhead bump. And I think that's what I'm going to start calling this, because if Nick Fitzgerald improves as a downfield passer, if Eris Williams takes his next step forward, I don't think he's going to be quite as good as Saquon Barkley, which I don't think is too outlandish of a take there. But I really want to see how Moorhead fares. I think he was the best assistant maybe in all of college football this year. I don't think that's that far of an outlandish statement to make. So I want to see how he fares and how the offense kind of changes. It's a different fit with Fitzgerald, who's really not a great downfield thrower, but he's a really, really good runner. He's a perfect fit in the Mullen offense.
Yes.
How does he fit in Moorhead's?
That'll be the key, how quickly that offense, who was built for the Mullen run-heavy style, is able to transition into the Moorhead deep ball-throwing, pass-heavy offense.
All right, so there's Mississippi State at number 23. Number 22, Florida State. The Taggart factor here, Tom, looks like it's going to have an effect.
I am so disappointed, just on a personal, selfish level, that we don't get to truly see DeAndre Francois and Auden Tate merge together into one dynamic 1-2 punch at quarterback receiver, because Tate's gone pro. I'm a big fan of Willie Taggart, but my question is, who is FSU right now? Are they the team everyone thought was going to be a national title contender last year before Francois got hurt? Or are they a team that needed to reschedule a game against the Cupcake to get it into a bowl game?
Which they still shouldn't have gotten into. But I think the key with them will be the ranking sort of reflects that unknown about them. We know they have the talent to be a top 15, even top 10 team, but we don't know kind of what they'll be with how bad they were this year. I think we'll see a lot of reliance on Cam Akers. Will be a sophomore running back. I think he could potentially be a dark horse Heisman candidate next year.
I agree.
All right, so there's Florida State, the Seminoles at number 22, number 21. Oregon, and you saw the job that Taggart did with them after Herbert got hurt, and it was kind of a tough situation. Now we're talking about Herbert's health and how he will be in the coming season.
I am a huge fan of Justin Herbert, and I think that if Herbert stays healthy and he continues to improve, I mean, he's going to be a Heisman candidate. He is not Marcus Mariota. I think that's an unfair comparison just because they're both Oregon quarterbacks, but I think he has the ability to be a high NFL draft pick as well. So if Herbert stays healthy all year in what's really I think not great Pac-12 overall, I think one of these teams will be ranked in the top 10 at some point, if not by the end of the year. Oregon is the team I'm watching the most here. Yeah,
for sure. And Herbert's a guy with size, good mobility, good arm strength. When he was healthy last year, in games he played, Oregon was 6-2. In games he wasn't, they were 1-4. Yep. So keeping him healthy is very key for them.
All right, there you see 25 through 21. Let's take a look at 20 here. West Virginia. Will Grier, Tom.
Yeah, one more dark horse, both for a Heisman candidate and I think to make a run in the Big 12. I think West Virginia is going to be a very popular sleeper pick.
Their schedule sets up well. They get TCU at home, get Oklahoma at home, both in the last 3 weeks of the regular season. So assuming there's no injuries and they're peaking at the right time, they'll be playing their best football in their biggest games in Morgantown.
Okay, so there's WVU. They're at number 20. Number 19, the national champions. With an asterisk, UCF.
The true national champions, undefeated. Look, UCF's going to have a good year next year. I expect them to win 10 games. Maybe they can get back into a New Year's Six bowl, but they're not going undefeated again this year. I'm not going to undersell the loss of Scott Frost's team, even though Mackenzie Milton's coming back.
Sure. Yeah, they'll certainly be in the running for the Group of Fives bid into a New Year's Six bowl, but they're not going to be a top 10 team or come anywhere near finishing undefeated. Maybe 1 or 2 losses, but they'll hang around the bottom part of the top 25.
Way too early. 2018, top 25 here. At 19, UCF. At 18, USC. Sam Darnold going to Cleveland. That's right. You heard it here first. So who's the quarterback now, Tom?
It will probably end up being Matt Fink or Jack Sears. I would think that Sears will end up winning that job. I think he was a little bit more touted coming out, and he redshirted this year for a reason. They didn't want to kind of burn that redshirt year. But I have real concerns about USC, and I know that everyone loves to hype up USC. They're one of the teams that every year, no matter what, will get hyped up. I did not buy them entering this year. They were actually kind of worse than I thought they were going to be. Look, I have serious problems about the Trojans, and I'll just tease this right now. I think if USC does not start the year well, you're going to hear Clay Helton's name on the hot seat again. Because this last year was supposed to be a great year. It didn't happen. Darnold did not improve as a passer. He actually regressed overall. If USC has more issues on offense, I would not be surprised if you hear Helton's name bubbling up as his job security is not that safe. Yeah,
the thing with USC, though, is the Pac-12 isn't great, and they have more talent because of the recruiting classes in the area they're based in than pretty much everybody else in the Pac-12. So finding solid quarterback play and avoiding that slow start they had when Darnold eventually took over for Max Brown last time they had a quarterback battle, that'll be key for them.
Defense should be really good.
USC at number 18. Number 17, the Horned Frogs of TCU. Look, they were in the Big 12 championship game. Didn't really put up much of a fight, Tom, but, something to build upon.
I'm never going to doubt Gary Patterson. I think he's one of the best coaches in all of college football, but it's the quarterback question now. Is it going to be true freshman Justin Rogers? Is it going to be Sean Robinson? I don't really know who it's going to be, and I think that's going to be a big factor for TCU. If they get steady quarterback play, they'll finish top 3 in the Big 12.
Yeah, Kenny Hill wasn't necessarily a top-end starter in college football, but he was above average and did a lot of things for TCU. So replacing him is the biggest question they face.
All right, so there's TCU at 17. Number 16, LSU. And you want to talk about quarterbacks, here's some uncertainty there.
I mean, they're still trying to find one for this year's class because they don't have much right now. Like, I think overall, I mean, if you're a young quarterback coming out of high school, and I think this was kind of what LSU is at right now, why would you want to go there? They have been completely unable to develop a quarterback for years now, so now they're paying with the level of talented guys that they're getting in.
That's why they're still 16, though, because they haven't had quality quarterback play in forever.
Yet they've always been good.
And they've always been good. So you're going to rely on your running game again, you're going to rely on your defense again, and that'll lead to a solid 9 or 10 win season, as we've seen in the SEC West.
All right, so we're going along here in our way too early top 25 in 2018. And Alan chiming in here. Team that scares me the most next year, Michigan, Shea Patterson, good run game, solid defense. Well, hey, Alan, we appreciate that comment, my man, because look what we have here. The Wolverines checking in at number 15, and it all comes down to Patterson, Tom.
Yeah, and I think maybe some people are wondering, hey, why is Michigan only 15? And I think it's because Shea Patterson is not eligible yet.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
That could end up changing, but as things stand right now, Michigan doesn't have Patterson as their quarterback, and if he does get declared eligible, I think Michigan goes up, but we're kind of hedging our bet here a little by having them just at 15 and not in the top 10 like some of the early top 25s had.
Yeah, and there are a number of factors here at play too with Patterson and all the hype and maybe him not living up to that. Number one would be run a very different offense at Ole Miss, and they're going to run at Michigan. They're going to try and incorporate more shotgun with him in there, but Michigan and Harbaugh are a team that's traditionally thrown the ball down the field, which is Patterson's strength. How much are they going to let him do that, and how much are they going to still rely on that dominant run game and kind of finding that mix, which will find some time and take a couple games, I think, and how quickly that comes together will determine how successful they are and whether they're playoff contenders.
I think you'll see some pistol offense too, kind of like Harbaugh ran with Kaepernick for the 49ers.
All right, go blue there at number 15. Number 14, Virginia Tech. And I could see this position here for them fluctuating up or fluctuating down. Just not sure where yet.
I was not high enough on Virginia Tech entering this year because of the uncertainty at quarterback, but now Josh Jackson is back, and I think Virginia Tech was kind of a year ahead of schedule last year. I think the ACC in general, with Miami of Florida being back, Virginia Tech back on the rise, I think the ACC is a conference trending upward. I think the Hokies are a really good dark horse pick to make it to the ACC championship game, maybe even win that as well. I think this is a really good Hokies team. I think Justin Fuente is a fantastic coach.
Justin Fuente is fast coach, but I'll disagree about them competing for the ACC championship. We saw, I think this is about where they'll end up, because we saw last year, and we've seen really the past couple years, they're really good against teams they're supposed to beat, but they don't have that talent to beat the top ends, the Clemsons and past years, the Florida States, and now maybe the Miamis in the ACC and Tennessee and Ohio State teams they've played out of conference. So they'll be good enough to finish around the top 15 because of their win. They won't have any bad losses, but they're also not going to have any good wins.
So Virginia Tech there at number 14. Checking in at number 13 here, the Stanford Cardinal, and a lot of players were waiting for them essentially whether or not they're going to go into the draft. Bryce Love, one of them.
And Bryce Love is one of the big guys there. There's some other guys on the defensive side of the ball, a guy like Quentin Meeks, who I think should probably end up going pro as well. And I would anticipate that Bryce Love leaves.
That's why they're 13.
And that's going to be an issue for Stanford. And I don't really know. Bryce Love really should go pro. Halfbacks go pro early.
Yeah.
I want to see KJ Costello take the next step forward and become a better pocket passer. He's shown the flashes. Consistency is not there yet.
I think we'll see Stanford, especially if Bryce Love leaves, rely more on the passing game, kind of go more of the Andrew Luck-style offense, where the running game is still a big factor, but it's probably a 50-50 split, maybe 55-45 passing to running with Costello, assuming he makes that leap forward.
All right, so Stanford at 13. Let's stay out west. Coming in at number 12, University of Washington, and we have a little breaking news to go along with this one. Could be looking at a new quarterback down the line, and Jacob Eason, he is considering transferring to the Huskies. And obviously this is newsworthy because we just saw Georgia play last night. Jake Fromm played effectively, and it looks like Fromm is that answer now for the Bulldogs. Eason saying to himself, okay, I got to get out of here.
And he's kind of going back home. He's going to go back to the state of Washington, and hopefully once Jake Browning's become that guy and kind of capitalize on the potential that made him the number 5 overall recruit in the nation.
Yeah, it'll work out perfectly because his transfer year that Huff set out will be this year, Browning's senior year. They're number 12 largely because of Browning. They'll lose some guys on offense, Dante Pettis, likely Myles Gaskin. But Browning is one of the better quarterbacks in the country, has been for the past 2 years. Again, weak Pac-12, especially Pac-12 North. They're the heavy favorites again. With Browning, assuming he continues to produce at a high level, they should be among the country's top teams again.
Going to be a little bit more pressure on Browning next year. We assume Myles Gaskin's going to leave. Levon Coleman is gone. Dante Pettis is gone. And you need to take that next step forward as a passer and become not just a quarterback that you win with, but you win because of.
Yep.
Learn more about that developing story as well, folks, on chatsports.com. Okay, so there's Washington at number 12. Number 11, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They're going to lose some pieces to the draft, most notably on the offensive line, Tom McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a big loss. They're also going to lose Josh Adams, their stud halfback. They're going to lose EQ St. Brown, their stud wide receiver. So now it's up to Brandon Wimbush to be more than just a running quarterback. He's going to have to find a way to improve as a pocket passer because I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball with the same effectiveness, losing all of those key players.
They're the team with the most bust potential.
I agree.
In this group. That could be, remember, 2 years ago they won just 4 games. And this year bounced back, had a better year, didn't win many games away from South Bend. We're counting on Wimbush making that progression and them having enough talent to replace the guys that they're losing. But those are tall tasks, replacing Josh Adams and EQ St. Brown. It's all going to come down to Wimbush and his ability to improve as a passer.
All right, so Notre Dame there at number 11. 15 through 11, as you see there in our way too early top 25 in 2018. The comments are flowing in. We certainly appreciate that here on Facebook Live. One of our commenters thinking Michigan would go 10-2, 11-1. Actually thinks Peters will carry the Wolverines, guys.
Look, I was pretty underwhelmed by Peters for much of the year. Early on when he first started playing, it looked like, the team loved the change. But look, we saw him in the bowl game. He's just not effective. And he is very young, so he should improve in the offseason, but it's not there
yet. He
yet.
needs to improve a lot, though, if they're going to be a 10-win or 11-win team, especially with how tough that Big Ten East is.
So we're going to know right away if Michigan's any good because they played Notre Dame to open the season in South Bend. If they win that game, the hype will be around Michigan. If they lose that game, might be some issues there.
Yeah.
The fans will not be happy.
No.
Appreciate the comment. Let's stay in the Big Ten. We've got number 10, Penn State, the Nittany Lions, McSorley and company getting it done. We assume so. And you got to look at the pieces that are leaving here. Of course, Moorhead is already gone, and Saquon Barkley headed to the draft, Tom.
And tight end Mike Gesicki's gone. Wide receiver Deshaun Hamilton is gone. So really the last couple of teams we've talked about, Stanford at 13, Washington at 12, Notre Dame 11, and now Penn State at 10. A common theme there is their quarterbacks are coming back, but they got to take the next step forward in their development. They have to become and not just the guy you win with or win in spite of, but the guy that leads you to wins on their own.
Yeah, very similar to Washington. A guy in McSorley who's been around, been a 2-year starter, will be his third year next year, but now he has to become the guy instead of just a guy on a talented offense.
Safe floors for both Penn State and Washington. Can they get their ceilings? It's going to become based on those quarterback play.
All right, so the Nittany Lions are at number 10. Number 9, the Tigers of Auburn. Jarrett Stidham remaining in Auburn. Brian, of course, very notable, and trying to help his draft stock too.
Yeah, now he was somebody who was inconsistent this year, which you would expect. He essentially missed an entire year and a half of football, transferring from Baylor and then sitting out a year. He ended up going to JUCO to try and play that year, but ended up not playing, only threw around at a high school pretty much before he went to Auburn. So he showed flashes of his potential and being a really good quarterback, his mobility especially, really good deep ball, but the consistency was not there because of that lack of experience. This year he got that experience. We assume next year he'll take that step forward and be more consistent. Those flashes will become who he is. But again, we need to see that before we can really say they're going to be a true playoff contender next year.
I mean, we kind of saw it across the board. And the games that Auburn lost, it was because Jarrett Stidham did not play well. 13 of 24 for 79 yards against Clemson. 9 of 26 for 165 against LSU. And then against Georgia, it was 50% completion percentage for 145. So when he played well, Auburn was one of the best teams in the nation. When he struggled, they couldn't beat anyone.
Yeah, when they beat Georgia and when they beat Alabama, he was the reason why they won those games. So that kind of gives you an idea of their ceiling if he plays well consistently.
Penn State at 10, Auburn at 9, at 8, Michigan State. A bit of a surprise for many people out there, I'm sure. But look, Lewerke, L.J. Scott coming back here, some continuity on that offensive side. And by the way, Michigan State just blew out Washington State in their bowl game.
You know, I think in general, Michigan State returns just so much talent. Like I think this year has proven that the year before that was a fluke for Michigan State.
Absolutely.
That Sparty is back, and they're going to be the same Sparty that we've seen for years under Mark D'Antonio, who is a fantastic coach, has gotten the most out of a program that doesn't recruit at the same level as an Ohio State or as a Michigan or even as a Penn State. But Michigan State, I think, is once again going to be a top 10 caliber team.
This hype is because of their offense. We know that Mark D'Antonio and his defense will always be sound and one of the better units in the country. With all those guys turning on offense, they're counting on them to be at least above average. And if they can be above average, they will be a playoff contender even in a tough Big Ten East.
Time for Lewerke to be a better passer.
Yes.
The Big Ten East, one of the tougher divisions in college football, as we have a reaction poll for all of you out at home. Big Ten East favorite in 2018, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State. Throw in your respective votes, and we'll be tracking them live here on Chat Sports. And you got to go with Ohio State, I would think, right, guys?
Not Maryland for you, Cam?
No. That's just depressing to even talk about.
One thing about those teams, other than Penn State, is excellent defenses. So Penn State, really, their chances are going to be contingent upon if they're kind of like Oklahoma was this year, if their defense can be just good enough to keep their complement their offense, because their offense is going to be very explosive. But against these teams that all have great defenses, that's going to be the key for Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
All right, folks, throw in those votes as we move along here in our rankings. Number 7, the Sooners of Oklahoma. And, guys, I'm looking at this from more of a intangible standpoint, not necessarily on the field. Just the fact that you are replacing the Heisman Trophy winner, Kyler Murray, that's a lot of pressure on you as a quarterback.
Look, we think that Kyler Murray is going to be a pretty good player, but we've also seen him play very limited for Oklahoma and look really good against, teams' backups. And we also saw him at A&M as a true freshman, to be fair. Not really look that good. So Oklahoma's 7 because of the uncertainty around their quarterback spot. And I think Murray's going to be a really good player. He's going to be a much more, read option-focused offense to let him use his legs than the air-it-out offense they used under Baker Mayfield. So they're going to be in good shape to make it back to the playoff. But I just want to see Kyler Murray who he actually is before we move up any higher.
And again, there will be some drop-off because unless he wins the Heisman, there's going to be drop-off just by the nature of how good Baker Mayfield was. So they can still be very good. We just need to see it.
Dustin already chiming in the comments section. Way too low for the Sooners. And, look, I feel like we're going to get a lot of those comments because, look, the Sooners just had a fantastic year, made it to the playoff and all that good stuff, even with that defense. But it's just the sheer change at quarterback from Baker to Kyler Murray. You got to drop them off just a little bit. We have the Sooners at 7, still a national championship contender in our eyes.
Let's take key passers on the defensive side of the ball, too.
Yes. Let's go to number 6 here, the Canes of Miami. Rozier at the quarterback position. How will he perform in 2018? Because, Brian, you mentioned it yesterday, did not finish off 2017 very well.
No, the key for them will be his progression. He was a bit of a Jalen Hurts-esque in his completion percentage. He seemed to struggle looking downfield at times, kind of panicked, wanted to throw his checkdowns. Needs to increase his completion percentage, be a bit more consistent, cut down the turnovers. And on the flip side, the defense needs to continue to force an insane number of turnovers because they're not great in terms of total yards allowed or points allowed. It's the turnovers and setting up their offense in short fields that made them special this year.
I'll throw this at you, Brian. I think that they force less turnovers this year or next year, but I think the defense overall is better.
Yes.
Because for the most part, Miami has almost everyone coming back.
That helps.
I mean, this is Miami was a year ahead of schedule this year. They were not supposed to be this good. This was supposed to be their step forward year, kind of like what Georgia ended up doing this year. This was supposed to be the off year for Miami. Next year was supposed to be the year. So I don't sleep on the Hurricanes. I know they ended the year poorly, but they're a year ahead of schedule. They're going to be dangerous.
All right, guys, 10 through 6 completed. Let's get to the top 5 now. Number 5, the Wisconsin Badgers. Jonathan Taylor certainly going to be in the Heisman conversation this year, Tom.
Absolutely, and I think he was in the conversation this year, and this is a Wisconsin team that now returns a bunch of key pieces on offense. They do lose Troy Fumagalli, the tight end. Hornibrook comes back, and he looked better in the bowl game, and he's going to only improve as he goes along. Taylor's back for that incredible offense. It's just going to run the football down everyone's throat. A.J. Taylor's back. T.J. Edwards comes back at linebacker. It's going to be another Wisconsin team. Schedule's a little bit tougher this year. Not quite the cupcake one that they had this year, but they're going to be a threat to win the Big Ten once again.
Difference will be Hornibrook's improvement.
Yes.
So the Badgers are at number 5. Let's take a look at number 4. We just saw this team last night. Could be seeing some turnover at quarterback. The Georgia Bulldogs. They're at number 4, guys. And let's just say it. A valiant effort last night against Saban's Tide. But the Georgia Bulldogs in that defense, solid. How about the running back position? That's where I'm seeing the most turnover here, Tom.
I really like DeAndre Swift, and they used him quite a bit more than I actually thought they were going to. I honestly thought that they might just redshirt Swift and allow Chubb and Michelle to get all the reps. They didn't do that. They gave Swift a lot of touches this year, both in the ground and the passing game. They like Swift as almost as like their pass catching back because he is so dynamic with the ball in his hands. He's going to be a more of a focal, ground and pound halfback next year. But he and Fromm are a dynamic 1-2 punch at quarterback, halfback, both going to be sophomores. Harvin's coming back. He had a fantastic game as well. Defense will use some key pieces, but I think they're going to be a really good defense as well. This is going to remain a dangerous threat here for Georgia going forward because they're going to be a threat year in and year out under Kirby Smart, I believe.
Yeah. That's why they're four. You got Fromm back. You got talent on defense. You got talent on the perimeter. But replacing Michelle and Chubb in the backfield and replacing Roquan Smith on defense kind of puts them back a little bit because we don't know how they're going to do that.
I mentioned changes are looming here in Georgia, and you see the breaking news at the bottom there talking about Jacob Eason more specifically could be transferring to the University of Washington, according to the Seattle Times. This just filed to us a few moments ago. If you've been watching the show throughout the hour, we're following this story. So that essentially cements Jacob Fromm as the guy for the Bulldogs going forward if indeed Eason leaves for Washington. So.
Unless Justin Fields beats him out.
Yes.
How could that be? Georgia starts another true freshman for the third straight year. I don't think that'll happen. I think Fromm's the guy going forward for them.
I agree.
Cam Rogers coming at you live here in Chat Sports alongside Tom Downey and Brian Rauf. We are at the Media Center here in Atlanta, Georgia, breaking down the College Football Playoff National Championship game, as well as giving you our early 2018 Top 25 rankings. Just took a look at number 4, the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 3 now, the Buckeyes of Ohio State. This is an intriguing one, Tom.
Yeah, and I think the big key for Ohio State is going to be who's the quarterback for them. Is it going to be Dwayne Haskins or is it going to be Tate Martell? I would like to see Haskins get the job there. I think he kind of to a lesser extent of what we saw with Alabama this year. I think you can see them air it out a little bit more successfully. J.T. Barrett, as good as he was for Ohio State, he wasn't quite the greatest passer when his first read wasn't there. He had a tough time going through those progressions and finding the open guy.
Talent everywhere. J.K. Dobbins come back. At running back is going to be a Heisman favorite. We'll touch on all those guys coming up here in a little bit. I think they like Martell right now a little bit more than Haskins. There were a couple times this year they talked about taking off Martell's red shirt. So it'll be a heated quarterback battle between Haskins and Martell. But I think whoever comes out of there is not only going to have big shoes to fill in J.T. Barrett, but they're going to have the ability to do it and potentially be a better player for Ohio State.
And incredibly high expectations as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, when you're in these top 5, top 10 teams, if you don't win a championship, it's a bit of a disappointing season.
Yes.
All right, so the Buckeyes are there at number 3. To number 2 in our rankings, the Clemson Tigers played a tough game against Alabama, the eventual champion. So, obviously, nothing to be embarrassed about, Tom.
No, and I will take this in a totally different direction here, guys, because I mentioned this on yesterday's show. Should Clemson move away from Kelly Bryant? Because I kind of think that they should, because I think the Alabama game just kind of affirmed this in my own mind, that Kelly Bryant is great. He's a great runner. He's been a big part of this Clemson team. But, you know, you need a guy that can air the ball out. And you got 2 5-star quarterbacks in there, and Hunter Johnson, who played a bit this year, and Trevor Lawrence. I would honestly, if I'm Dabo Swinney, I would take the risk and I'd go for it all, and I'd move to one of those guys that give you a little bit more through the air. And that was the issue against Alabama. Bryant couldn't do it through the air.
I would still give Brian a chance to prove that he can improve as a downfield passer. I think we'll see him start the year, potentially play a couple games. Early games are usually easier if he either if he struggles or they start blowing teams out. Those other guys will get a chance and they'll be able to prove what they can do. But if early in the season you don't see Brian improve as a downfield passer, one of those other guys could very well take his job.
USA Today had Clemson at number 1 in their Wait Till Your Top 25, which I thought was unbelievable.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Well,
how can you do that?
You know what?
Because Kelly Bryant was back. That was their reasoning.
We have Alabama at 1, and rightfully so, the national champions. And look, guys, we don't know what's going to happen with Jalen Hurts, but let's assume that Tua Tags, as we like to call him, will be that guy going into next season and perhaps part of the Heisman conversation. It's not that crazy to think about that.
We do need to figure out a better nickname for Tua, I think. And I don't really know what it quite is yet. Now I'll mention one more thing here about Tua. There is another one, by the way. There's Tulia, his younger brother, 2019 recruit, 4-star quarterback.
Ooh.
There's another one coming,
Watch
folks.
out.
I think you can't put anybody else but Alabama number 1. We just saw them win the national championship with freshmen thrown in essentially at halftime.
It's unbelievable. I mean, if you had told me that Alabama was going to win that game because they had a freshman wide receiver catch the game-winning pass, their second-leading receiver was also a true freshman, their left tackle ended up being a true freshman, they put in a quarterback and halfback who had hardly played at all this year in terms of meaningful snaps, and they win the game, I've been like, what happened?
Just imagine what'll happen. Just imagine what'll happen next year when you give these guys preparation, time to prepare, and then experience. They're only going to get better.
Dynasty ain't dead, folks.
No.
It's still here.